Now in the Hebrew of this verse, it's kind of an interesting beginning, because it begins, Yapethe Elohim leyapeth, which the word pethe means to be open, enlarged, and open-minded. The name Japheth, or Japheth, is rooted in the word pethe, so it takes on the same meaning. So the concept that we might formulate here is that Elohim broadens our mind in order for us to grow. Now, we can take that in the contents or in the context of learning Torah and allowing the instruction of Elohim to broaden our mind, or we can do what we've seen recently, that, well, God changes his mind, and the Bible's a living document, and we have to have an open mind, and we have to allow our mind to expand and grow. That's another part of it, because Japheth, well, let's talk about the descendants of Japheth, and we'll talk about the other meanings of Japheth. Japheth, we think of the magnificent art, architecture, literature, philosophy of the Greeks and the Romans. Japheth is the father of the Greeks and the Romans, and basically the Gentiles, the majority of the people living on earth, are descendants of Japheth. Japheth represents our ability to think constructively and artistically, but the root pethe holds a darker side, that it also means to be deceived, to be naive, and to be gullible. And this is where that other thing that we were talking about, that it's a living document and that God changed his mind, because we don't want to say Yahweh Elohim, because all that Hebrew stuff was done away with. And so it also means to be gullible, to be deceived, to be naive. According to Rabbi Hirsch, Japheth represents our feelings or senses that are open to all external impressions and influences. How many things do we read every day that affect the way we think? How much news do we take in? And we don't know what media is good news, intermediate news, really bad reporting. We don't know. Are we gullible to take in any of the silliness that's given to us? Or do we take seriously some of the things that maybe we should take seriously? So this is Japheth, that it represents our feelings or senses that are open to all external impressions and influences. He also says that naivety is a problem in this particular type of person. This particular type of person is easily deceived, which brings us to the next phrase that tells us, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. Well, why would you dwell in the tents of Shem? What do we learn in the tents of Shem? It gives us a hint as to what it is that can help those who are represented by Japheth mentally and spiritually. The word for dwell is veshakon, that means and shall dwell. The root of this word means to settle down and to be established. It also means to tabernacle in. The root of this word is shakab, that means to rest and to find rest. If we keep these definitions in mind and we turn our attention to the tents of Shem, then we can formulate an idea as to where we become established and find our rest that instructs us and teaches us so that we are not naive and deceived. The word for tent is be'ohel-e, from the root ohel, that means not only tent, but also refers to a tabernacle. And it also refers to the tabernacle of Yahweh Elohim that we read about in Shemot. So if we consider that the tents of Shem refer to the tabernacle of the name. And if we then consider the first chapter of John, verses 1 through 3, Bereshit 1:1 and John 1:14, we can see that in this house of authority of Yahweh Elohim, there we have the word bara. And if we take the letters of bara, we have the Beit and the Resh. Beit means house. Resh means authority. Aleph is Elohim. So this is the house of the authority of Elohim. We take a look at John 1 through 3 that says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. Now, the Word was Elohim. This is something that we really, really need to grasp and understand. People would say that, oh, Jesus is God. The Word was Elohim. The Word of Elohim is Torah, His instruction, His restoration, His redemption, His rest. The thing that delivers us in Tanakh, the Torah is called Yeshua. But the Word was Elohim, that the Word is our mighty judge who has the authority to bring us redemption and rest. It is through Torah that we seek Elohim to live, like Amos tells us, but it's also through Torah that Elohim watches us to see how we are relating to Him and how we're building our relationship to Him through Torah. It's more than an idea, oh, Jesus is God because Jesus is the Word. It's a very, very Hebraic concept. The Word has the authority to bring us redemption and rest. We have to know the Word. We have to believe and receive. Okay? But in the body of John 1 through 3, it also says that through the Word, everything came into creation. And without the Word, nothing was created. The word for created is bara. So we understand that bara represents the authority of the house of Yah. Okay? And the Word of Elohim, and that the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us, from John 1:14. If the Word had not tabernacled among us, then the restoration that Yeshua, the human being Yeshua, brought was that His blood, He became the vehicle of sacrifice. He became the Tav. And through that vehicle of sacrifice, restored a covenant that we broke, that allows us to make teshuvah, and allows us to be delivered from whatever situation we're in. Not just delivered from sin and death, but delivered from whatever situation we're in. The concept of saved, salvation. Salvation, saved, well, there's not really a word for saved or salvation in Hebrew. Because we ask, saved from what? Delivered. Elohim delivers us out of our trials and tribulations. He restores us. He redeems us. He delivers us in the name of Yeshua. But we still have free will. He won't interfere with our free will. So we can still transgress. What are we saved from? Really, there's nothing that we're saved from, but we are delivered and restored and redeemed by our Elohim through that blood that restored a covenant that we had broke. He allows us to make teshuvah. Instead of once a year, the high priest sprinkling the blood on the people after he's recited the entire Torah, and everybody says, oh, I agree. Okay? So we find our rest in and are taught and instructed by Yeshua, who as the living Torah restores us, redeems us, and delivers us, in this case from deception and naivety. Rabbi Hirsch stated this about these verses. That which is said in these verses contains perhaps the deepest and farthest reaching prophecy which ever a human eye has been allowed to see of the future, and which Elohim has allowed to be spoken by human lips. The whole history of humankind, the beginning, the end, and the middle, lies in these three verses. Within these three verses, we have every, what am I trying to say here? Every race of people is defined here. But it also defines the three particular types of people that we encounter in life. But we also see how these particular types of people can affect the world. You get the wrong type of person in government who is, and I hate to break it down in this type of way, but it's something that we can understand. We get somebody that's Ham or Canaan minded in government, that deals strictly on emotion and their sensuality, doesn't believe in Elohim, don't give me any of that God stuff. I'll join the Southern Baptist Convention because that's the thing to do if I'm going to be a politician, and ignore everything altogether. Or we get the Japheth kind of guy who is totally liberal because he can get swayed back and forth, just like James talks about, or Jacob, who talks about the double-minded man. He's swayed this way and he's swayed that way because he's not grounded in a relationship with Elohim. Or we say, well, all that Elohim stuff only belongs in Torah studies and on Erev Shabbat, or all that God stuff only belongs in Sunday service for a couple of hours, but that doesn't apply to our everyday life. But we realize that the Torah, from our studies of actually the mitzvot in the Torah, we find that the 613 mitzvot that the rabbis talk about, and there's more than those within Torah, apply to every aspect of our life. Everything, not just churchiness or shuliness, but to every aspect of our life. So when he says that this affects everything, he's right. Because if we get a Shem-like person in there who is led by Elohim, then this person can control his sensuality, and he can control his passionate urges to take in information because he can rightly discern what is and what is not. So, being able to understand our condition or state of being is, again, something that helps us in trying to answer, or in answering every day, the age-old question, where are you? Elohim asked Adam after the transgression, where are you? And that's a question that we should continue to ask ourselves on a regular basis. This is, I was actually happy that we could do this particular study. This is kind of a foundation for our going into the genealogies of Shem, which will actually now for real start next week. I've forgotten that we still had these three verses to go through. We'll start that genealogy with verses 28 and 29 of Bereshit 9, which first of all say that Noah lived another 350 years after the flood, and that he was 950 years old when he died. I've started a chart that actually shows the overlap when all the children were born, all the grandchildren were born, to show us that Noah was still alive and kicking in time to teach Abram, and barely alive and kicking in time to teach Isaac. And that Shem and his grandson, Eber, were also around to teach Isaac and Jacob both. And that it was was offered to Esau according to the book of Yashar, but Esau didn't want to have anything to do with any of that. He was too busy hunting. I know it was kind of wordy. It's a lot easier to read than it is the discussion. But any questions on these blessings and curses? Because they're really not blessings and curses. They're statements. Going once, going twice. Grooviness has been achieved.